Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and now Vice President of Football and Research at Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. As always, our producer Justin Stein is on the controls. He is back, the newly married man. And we have a special guest today, Cole Ratliff. He will join us to discuss a quarterback that he's been following a lot longer than we have, Mr. Patrick Mahomes. But first, let's get right in, Aaron. What do you make of your beloved Patriots going home?
It was a little bit of a surprise. It was sad because of how they lost. First of all, that they had a first and goal on the 1 and couldn't score. And all props to the Titans defense for stopping them. But then the other problem was Belichick's just phenomenally conservative calling of the game. Just afraid to go for it on fourth downs. And when they punted back to the Titans with whatever it was, 3.5 minutes to go, you knew the game was over. And it's just, they lost by a sliver of a hair, and it's just too bad.
It feels like Brady's really going to play somewhere else next year. Is that what you're gathering?
There's been a lot of talk about it. I talked to a lot of folks about it after the game. I think it's a question of whether he thinks he can really get anything better out of playing somewhere else. The team that's been hinted a lot is the Chargers, and he would have better weapons, but a worse offensive line. I think the idea that Brady is going to suddenly go to another team and have to teach his offense to a bunch of new guys and suddenly become a top 10 quarterback again seems a bit far-fetched.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of Brady's career has been far-fetched, so I'm as dubious about betting against him as anybody else. But it does seem like not the easiest way for him to kind of proceed with things, that's for sure.
I would think, staying with the Patriots, you've got an easy division to win. The problem is the defense is going to regress next year. Now, the good news is Buffalo's defense is also going to probably regress next year, but it still seems to me like winning that division is a lot easier than overcoming the Chiefs right now in the AFC West. So I don't know. There's a lot of discussion about it. I think it's the end of the era. This is the last rodeo. I think even if Brady comes back to the Patriots with the defense regressing and the offense, probably not taking a huge step forward, if it even can get better than it was this year, you're talking about a team that maybe wins a bad division at 9-7, but the days of the Patriots being the boogeyman that scared the rest of the NFL, that's over.
One more thing I wanted to ask you about. We saw the few jobs that were open fill up. Any big takeaways there? The Giants, Joe Judge, most people at first didn't even realize he coached the special teams. They thought he was just a receivers coach. That was one. And then the Browns job's still open. Wondering just if you had any thoughts on those.
On one hand, I like a special teams coach getting a shot. I'm a big fan of a special teams coach. They're more of an overall manager than they are game planners, and that's what you need to be a head coach. I think there's this sort of mistaken impression that what you need for a head coach is like a master coordinator, and that's not. That's what you need for a coordinator. A head coach is much more of a management position where you have to inspire the team, you have to manage a lot of different personalities. And I think special teams is a good background for that. On the other hand, I don't know what to do to get more minorities into place to get these jobs, right? Eric Bieniemy is the name that's been mentioned a lot this year as offensive coordinator of the great Kansas City offense, except, everyone knows that Andy Reid has a lot of his hands in that, but also because the Chiefs are still in the playoffs, you can't really interview him yet, so it's the same problem that other head coaches other coaching candidates have had in previous years. But, I don't know what to do about that fact because these jobs, individually, every guy who gets hired, there's good arguments for that hire. But then when you look at it overall, we need more minority head coaches.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't think there's a silver bullet anytime you face that kind of question. But I think that the only thing that you can ever do is really try to make sure that you're not just having one strategy. I think the Rooney Rule is a good idea, and it accomplishes good things to an extent. But I think really at kind of all different levels of developing the interest in these positions and developing the coaches as they move along, and really taking this on as something that culturally is important to you. in a multifaceted way, I think is the only way that you can ever really make change here. And that's got to start, not just from the bottom up, but also from the top down. So they got to get serious about it.
Yeah, and Cleveland is the last job open. And again, the main candidates are white guys, but yet you make a good argument for each candidate. I mean, Josh McDaniels as a head coach candidate, again, is something everybody agrees about. Obviously, he's had a lot of success as a coordinator. Kevin Stefanski was apparently the candidate that the analytics people liked in Cleveland the most last time, so I think he's a really good candidate this time. We know that Jim Schwartz has an analytical mind, so if they're looking to go in that direction, that's a good direction to go in. So it's, again, you can't argue against any of these candidates for what Cleveland is looking for, but at the same time, here we are with the last job open, and it's all white guys up for it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like this is going to be different in that situation. Interesting to see how that one will pan out after all the dust settles there. You've got to think that
I'm going Stefanski. I think Stefanski, he was the guy that they liked a year ago. I don't think anything this year would make you sour on him at all.
Right. If it's true that was DePodesta's guy a year ago, and now DePodesta's been empowered, then ipso facto, the dots connect. But on that note, let's keep it in Minnesota and talking about Stefanski, and let's get right into the most important games of the week, the only 4 important games of the week. And the first one is Minnesota at San Francisco, which I think might be one of the most interesting out of all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the fact that I was more surprised to see the Saints leave the playoffs than I was to see the Patriots leave the playoffs. I thought the Saints were the best team in the NFC. Obviously with the disadvantage of not having the bye week, but that's not a disadvantage in the first round because the team you're playing against also doesn't have the bye week. So I was surprised to see the Saints offense. The Saints offense really struggle except on Taysom Hill plays. And Minnesota win that game, even though by our numbers, I think we had New Orleans as the higher DVOA in the game, but the point of the game is not to have the higher DVOA, it's to win the game.
Yeah, I saw that in your DVOA column that Minnesota won with a lower DVOA, but you pointed out many more plays run. And that I think goes back to what you talked about last week when you said if this is going to be an upset, this is going to be they're going to have to do something to kind of shorten the game for New Orleans. And you saw New Orleans running much fewer plays offensively than Minnesota did. So I think even though the result was surprising, the way that came to pass, I think you were spot on there. You also pointed out in your DVOA column that New Orleans messed up the time management in that one, and that also certainly had something to do with it. And I couldn't help but think back to week 1 versus the Texans when New Orleans spiked the ball with a timeout in their pocket with 6 seconds left in the game. And that worked out for them that time because they were able to throw a quick little curl route and call the timeout. But it came back to bite them here. So I'm sure that's something from a process standpoint that they're going to be evaluating in the offseason. Maybe they'll double down and say, we really want to keep that timeout in our pocket. We really value it. But I think they might have taken that strategy too far in this one. And I'm with you that they I think, messed up that time management a little bit.
Keeping that timeout in their pocket cost them 40 seconds, and that's 3 or 4 plays.
So getting back to this matchup, we got number 7 against number 5 in weighted DVOA. You got Kyle Shanahan on one side going against his former boss, amongst other relationships, Vikings assistant head coach Gary Kubiak. So these teams know each other well, both like to establish the run with the zone up front, play action bootleg concepts off of it. But at the end of the day, these are two teams with much more in the points earned passing rather than rushing this year. So I think it comes back to Kirk Cousins against Jimmy G.
Well, most teams are better with points earned passing than rushing. I mean, same goes with DVOA, right? I will say San Francisco's defense is, comparatively weaker against the run than the pass. They were second against the pass and 11th against the run. So Minnesota, you may want to run a little bit here. Minnesota is better on runs to the outside, but San Francisco is weaker on runs to the inside. So the Minnesota strength and the San Francisco weakness do not match up when it comes to the running game.
Yeah, I'm interested, I think offensively, kind of similar in what they're trying to do there. On the defensive side of the ball, I think the Vikings pass rush and pass D were great last week, but a little bit more uneven compared to the 49ers, who were number 3 in pass defense points saved this year, and Nick Bosa, who finished as the leader in total points amongst defensive linemen this year. So I look at that, and I think the Niners are a little bit stronger in this one when you kind of put it all together across the board. but I don't think any sort of result would surprise me when you get into this sort of a familiarity that you have between these two teams.
I mean, the overriding thing that we should mention before we talk about any of these games is, with each of these games, the favorite has not only the home field advantage, but the bye week advantage of the divisional round. And we know that that's a big advantage. There's a reason why the 1 and 2 seeds tend to make it to the conference championships. They're better teams. They're at home. They've had a week off. San Francisco has all those advantages. I will say there's some interesting numbers here with the San Francisco offense against the Minnesota defense. Minnesota is the number 1 DVOA defense against tight ends. San Francisco is actually the number 2, but Kyle Rudolph is not, anywhere near the threat that George Kittle is. It's interesting why Minnesota is the number 1 defense versus tight end. Part of it is they've picked off 7 passes to tight ends this year, which leads the league by a good amount. But even if you remove turnovers, they're still second against tight ends. Darren Waller and Austin Hooper kind of sliced and diced them, but they were relatively good against Travis Kelce, Evan Ingram, and Zach Ertz. Now, I thought about it, and I couldn't really think of sort of similarities and differences there between those tight ends as to what would make Waller and Hooper different from Kelce, Ingram, and Ertz. So I think it's sort of a mixed bag. But overall, the fact is the Minnesota defense has been very good against tight ends this year.
Yeah, you circled the same matchup as I did. I'm super excited. George Kittle, number 1 tight end in points earned against the top safety in points earned, Harrison Smith. I think, in terms of 2 guys that move the needle from positions that don't as often move the needle for offenses and defenses, that matchup should be fascinating. I hope we get to see those guys one-on-one throughout a lot of the day, because that would be a lot of fun.
And, of course, connected to that, San Francisco, we know, depends a lot on yards after the catch. Minnesota is the best tackling team in the league by the percentage of plays with a broken tackle on defense. And in fact, they have been one of the top tackling teams in the league for years.
Really looking forward to this game. I think for me, this is the most interesting game of the week. I have a feeling you're going to think that the other NFC game might be a little bit more fascinating. But for me, I'm really interested in this one. I give the Vikings as good a chance as anybody to win on the road this week.
If by fascinating you mean which is the game with the biggest chance for the underdog to pull an upset, yes, I'm going to be going with Seattle Green Bay as my choice for that.
All right, well, before we get back over there, let's flip over to the AFC and talk about what I think are 2 much less compelling matchups. I would be shocked if either of the away teams won in Baltimore or in Kansas City. But let's start there in Baltimore. The Ravens, the number 1 team in DVOA, runaway number 1. The Titans have been better lately, all the way up to number 4 in weighted DVOA. But are you with me that an upset would be shocking here?
Yeah, I'm with you, and I'm with Vegas. I mean, the lines on these games are 9 and 9.5. Baltimore has just been a juggernaut this year, and I just don't see it as likely. Now, look, the fact is the Ravens are weaker against the run than they are against the pass. They're 29th in DVOA against the run on first down. They're actually first against the run on third down. But if we're talking about let's just start off our series by handing the ball to Derrick Henry, the Ravens are 29th against the run on first down, and they're weaker against runs up the middle than they are runs to the outside. So it's not too crazy to see a situation where a lot of Derrick Henry having a big game and a few big play action passes for Tannehill, and the Titans are going to outscore the Ravens. Now, I mean, my basic feeling about this game is sort of how I felt about the Patriots-Titans game last week, and I was wrong, which was I think the Ravens defense versus the Titans offense is a great matchup of strengths, but the Ravens offense should overwhelm the Titans defense, which just isn't that good. And last week I thought, well, the Patriots offense should do enough against the Titans defense. And the Titans defense played a strong game, but the Ravens offense is way better than the Patriots offense. And that's a hell of a matchup for the Titans defense.
Yeah, it would take something like what Lamar Jackson put up in the first half of his playoff game last year. And I think we've come a long way since that performance.
The Titans don't have the defensive backs to do what the Chargers did. And the Ravens have seen that on film now, and they know how to counter that now.
So last week we mentioned that Tannehill often struggled against cover one this year while he excelled against virtually everything else. And, in the game against the Patriots, the Titans barely threw, and Tannehill finished with just 3 attempts and 0 completions against cover one. The Patriots were the best team in cover one this year, but Baltimore was a close second. They had 86 points saved, in cover one this year. So I think looking at that again and looking at those cover one splits with Tannehill, I think that could be another tough matchup. I don't see any reason in the world why the Titans wouldn't sit back, send 5 rushers with Earl Thomas sitting there over the deep.
Why the Ravens wouldn't sit back in the cover one. And they blitz more than any team in the league, so they easily would send 5 rushers.
So I think it's another tough matchup for Tannehill. I won't be surprised if he has another tough game here. I just think this is a tough matchup. Other things on the Ravens side of things, giving some love to the offensive line. They have 4 of the top 17 offensive linemen in total points earned this year, including Orlando Brown, who tied for first in the league amongst offensive linemen. Not bad for a guy who ran a 6.8 40-yard dash or whatever it was. And then similar for the Ravens secondary, Marlon Humphrey, Earl Thomas, these guys, Marcus Peters, all in the top 17 in pass coverage points saved this year. I just think this team's going to overwhelm the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, the Titans, their run defense is better than their pass defense, but, this is not an ordinary running game, right? I mean, that run defense is not mostly built against teams where you don't know where the ball is because of all the options and all the quarterback runs. And the Tennessee, as far as when Baltimore has to pass, Tennessee is 30th in pressure rate on defense. I think the Baltimore offense is just going to overwhelm the Tennessee defense.
We're in agreement there. Let's take a quick break, and then we will come back in with Cole Ratliff to talk about the other AFC game and one particular quarterback. Sports Info Solutions is excited to announce the launch of its public-facing site, SISDataHub.com. The new SIS Data Hub is free for all to use and features detailed player pages and leaderboards that provide some of the best information available. In addition to all of the standard statistics, here you'll find proprietary data collected by SIS video scouts, like on-target percentage for quarterback, pressure rates for edge rushers, blown blocks for offensive linemen, and more. You'll also find advanced metrics calculated from all of that data, like independent quarterback rating, total points earned, total points saved, and many, many more statistics, from adjusted blown block percent to positive percentage for receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, broken tackles, air yards, and more. For the most avid football fanatics, a pro version of the Data Hub is also available, which contains everything from the free version as well as filters to split by situation, personnel, and almost anything else imaginable, coverage scheme, run direction, and more. The Data Hub Pro also includes team leaderboards, NCAA data, and the ability to download all data as CSV files. You can register for a free 7-day trial by going to pro.sisdatahub.com. All right, coming right back. The next big game of the week on Sunday will be Houston at Kansas City. Kansas City is number 3, and Houston is all the way down at number 23 in weighted DVOA. I think that's a telling stat, and it'll be hard for them to stop Mahomes, who's the leader in total points earned per game in 2019 on a per-game basis. It was Mahomes over Rodgers and everybody else. We'd like to welcome Cole Ratliff from the SIS Ops team to the show. Cole, how far back do you go with Patrick Mahomes?
Thanks for having me. First saw him in 2014 when he came in for Davis Webb due to injury, but really started scouting him in 2016 before we had the rookie handbook.
And the people at home can't see you right now, but you're wearing a Texas Tech shirt and a Texas Tech hat. Any connection there?
Yeah, I actually graduated from Texas Tech University with a degree in exercise and sports science. So there's some ties there as far as going to school there and watching Mahomes. So you watched him over the years, but then you mentioned you really started studying him hard in 2016. That was before the Football Rookie Handbook, but we were already doing scout school around here, and you were learning that NFL-style scouting. What did you see with him? Like I said, what I saw with him, it was my first report. Like, I saw the athletic ability. He played baseball and basketball, and he was just a natural athlete, and he had amazing arm strength, and just his natural ability just jumped off the page to me. And I asked you a few times if I was rating him too high, and you
I said probably.
Right, but you also said, trust what you see. If you're seeing something really good, you should trust your instincts.
That's good. And as the time went on, you pointed out every critical factor, just the off the charts athleticism, accuracy, the arm talent. You pointed out all those things. And here we are, fast forward. You even pointed out that maybe the Chiefs would be a good landing spot for him. I think he ended up going higher in the draft than anybody thought.
Right. I predicted he'd go to the Chiefs. I think they were at 27. They ended up trading up to number 10 to get him. So that was a little bit, serendipitous on my part. So
yeah, it worked out that Andy Reid saw the same thing that you did. So let's circle back and loop Aaron back into the conversation. Going into this game this week, what are you looking at here when you talk about Mahomes going in against this Houston defense?
Well, I mean, the fact is that by overall season numbers, this should be very easy for Kansas City. But we know that Houston went into Kansas City back in week 6 and beat the Chiefs in Kansas City. So it can be done. And the way they did it was they kept Mahomes off the field with runs, right? I mean, obviously, we know that the whole, keeping the other team off the field thing doesn't quite work that way because, each team has the same number of drives. But they just, Houston did the whole shortening the game thing. They had 40 minutes of possession, whereas Kansas City had 20, and they ran the ball and ran the ball and ran the ball and ran the ball and ran the ball, and Kansas City couldn't stop it. So Kansas City couldn't get Mahomes on the field. And in the fourth quarter, Mahomes had one drive that went 3 and out, and the entire rest of the fourth quarter was Houston just running the ball with a couple of passes. That being said, that strategy is not as predictive of the future as being able to pass the ball. And in fact, even though Houston won that game, Kansas City had the higher DVOA rating for that game, indicating that their performance was more indicative of success down the road. And of course, for the whole season, Kansas City's just been the much better team, especially, we talk about Mahomes, but especially on defense. The Kansas City pass defense has been far superior to Houston pass defense for most of the year.
Yeah, I don't think it would be, as good as that they've been recently, especially. It wouldn't be shocking to see Houston move the ball. Deshaun Watson can be magical at times, but I think it would be shocking to see Houston stop Mahomes. I think I agree with your general premise that keeping him off the field might be the best way. We saw the Colts go against Kansas City earlier this year. The Ravens, I should say, going for 2 every time that they went into the game. Just they're going to go for 2 every time against Mahomes just to try to keep up with him. Cole, is there anything that you see, whether it's something Houston can do or anything else, is there anything that is a weakness in Mahomes' game where, aside from keeping him off the field, is there anything that you can do to slow him down?
I think if you keep pressure on Mahomes and make him make decisions outside of the pocket, you can kind of keep the pressure on him, throw off his accuracy a little bit. But that's one of the main points I'd like to make is, if you keep the pressure on him, you can kind of make him throw into a bad situation, throw into tight windows, maybe cause him to turn the ball over a little bit.
Houston 25th in pressure rate. I realize that's half a season without J.J. Watt, but still, I mean, there's a couple of pressure guys there in Watt and Merciless, but it's not a huge pass pressure team.
Yeah, I mean, really watching them last week, against the Bills, you just see there's really not a lot outside of those guys there on that defense. J.J. Watt, when he plays, he's as good as anybody. And with Merciless, who also had a great season, they'll need those guys to put a lot of pressure on because otherwise, it's hard to see how it goes. Other side of the ball, maybe Will Fuller getting back in there can stretch the defense a little bit. The offense just looks so different with him out there. They really didn't move the ball offensively last week against the Bills. But Will Fuller could be one guy that makes a defense against that improved Kansas City secondary.
Yeah, and I will say, going back to Mahomes, the Houston defense was 4th in DVOA against deep passes. That's 16 or more yards downfield. But they're 30th against short passes, including dead last against the short middle of the field. And Mahomes was number 1 in the league on passes to the short middle of the field. So, I mean, good luck covering Travis Kelce, not to mention those crossers by guys like Hill and Cole and Hardman. They
fast. All right, Cole, thank you so much for coming on and blessing us with a little bit of your knowledge about Patrick Mahomes. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, picking right back up. Let's move to the final game of the week, the one that Aaron had circled before. It's Seattle, who has a better rank than Green Bay in terms of weighted DVOA, but they'll have to go on the road. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I mean, Green Bay has the advantage because of all the divisional round advantages that I discussed earlier, but I do think that Seattle has been a slightly better team this year, primarily because of, when you adjust for schedule, because they played the second hardest schedule in the league. They're sort of similar teams in that both teams really outperformed their play-by-play and outperformed their Pythagorean projections, right? Green Bay was 8-1 in games decided by 8 points or less. Seattle is 11-2 in games decided by 8 points or less, if you include last week's win in the wild card round. So Green Bay is slightly better than Seattle on defense and special teams. The gap between these teams is on offense, and it's almost entirely in the passing game. And of course, that does bring us to an interesting discussion because of the fact that points earned has Aaron Rodgers rated so much differently from a lot of the other advanced metrics out there regarding Aaron Rodgers. But even if points earned is saying that Rodgers himself is better than the Green Bay passing offense was as a whole, Rodgers isn't playing by himself. It's the Green Bay passing offense as a whole. And the Green Bay passing offense as a whole was just not as good as Seattle's as far as efficiency.
Right. We've got Rodgers ahead of Wilson in total points. That's our division of credit metric. But we have Wilson second in IQR, which is ahead of Rodgers. He's behind only Lamar Jackson in IQR. That's independent quarterback rating, which is our slant on quarterback rating, where we control for only things that are in the quarterback's wheelhouse. So different stats will tell you different things. That's part of the reason why I don't like to just rely on one statistic to describe anything. These are both special players at the end of the day. And for me, I think when you look at what's different in this game, I do look at the rest of the team. I like Aaron Jones and the Packers front line. I think that's a lot stronger than just the hodgepodge of injuries that the Seahawks are rolling out there right now. And I think the Packers are also a little bit stronger defensively. Most positions looking around, when I compare position groups, I see the Packers as a stronger team. So I'm a little bit surprised that, kind of when you look at things on the head-to-head, you see it, a little differently.
The actual result, and I understand that, because if I went position by position, I'd be with you that Green Bay has the stronger position groups, especially pass rush. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the actual performance over the course of the year, Green Bay's defense is only slightly better than Seattle's defense. It is better, but it's not better by much.
Interesting. So if Seattle wins this one, what does that look like to you? How can they win this game? Where are the matchups?
They win this game by putting it in Wilson's hands, which I don't know if I trust Brian Schottenheimer and Pete Carroll to do it because they're so in love with the running game. But the fact is, Wilson has been ridiculously efficient passing the ball. They win the game by letting Wilson pass the ball, running play action passes, getting it downfield to Metcalf and Lockett. And and then on defense, just, keeping Green Bay somewhat contained. Quandre Diggs having a big game. Obviously, their defense has been much better with Quandre Diggs playing than before they traded for Quandre Diggs or in the 2 games where he was injured at the end of the season. But mostly it's Russell Wilson wins the game on his own, or with the help of his receivers.
Right. And then I'd say one advantage is Aaron Jones for the Green Bay Packers. Part of me thinks that he could get going, but really I think this one ends up being a shootout. It's just hard for me to imagine any other result in the playoffs other than Rodgers and Wilson playing well and making this kind of a tit for tat between the two of them.
I mean, the biggest story as for how Green Bay wins is simple, which is Green Bay brings pressure and Seattle doesn't. Because Green Bay is third in pressure rate on defense and Seattle is 30th on offense. But Seattle is dead last on defense while Green Bay is 10th in pressure rate on offense. And they're first in ESPN's pass block win rate. So, I mean, that's the simple Green Bay story. The simple Green Bay story is that Darius Smith wrecks havoc and Jadeveon Clowney is hurt. I mean, that's the Green Bay story. Seattle's story, I think, is Russell Wilson takes over.
On that note, we will sign off. Thank you to all of the listeners. You guys are what makes the Off the Charts Football podcast. So please keep the feedback coming and keep letting us know that you like the show. Also help spread the word about the Off the Charts Football podcast by subscribing, rating, and most importantly, write up a quick review. Let us know what we're doing well. You can hit us up on Twitter at sportsinfo_SIS and at FB Outsiders. And keep your eyes out for the 2020 Football Rookie Handbook. It is coming this February. For my co-host, Aaron Schatz, for our guest, Cole Ratliff, and our producer, Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.